And we are back. Welcome to World Cup Fantasy Football. We do love a bit of fantasy football on this channel, but before we actually get into the team, what we're going to do today is run through the rules because there are some very interesting rule changes for the World Cup Fantasy Football that I think make team building a little bit more interesting.
Oh, really?
So the team creation process is exactly the same as usual. You have 15 players to make from 100 million budget in the formations that we all know and love. And of course, it is a maximum of 3 players per nation as opposed to 3 players per club as we normally have it in the Premier League. As you go into the later rounds, as team gets knocked out, that increases of how many you can have per nation, which I think is fair because obviously you then wouldn't have enough players. Next up is the captaincy. Now, the captaincy is different to what we normally see in fantasy football because day to day you can change your captain if your captain underperformed. So it doesn't mean like you can transfer your captain and say you have one player get 10 points on one day. You want him to have his 10 points, but you think someone's going to do really well tomorrow. So you can move the captaincy and that player will stay on 10. No, that player will drop back down to 5 and your new captain will get the double points. So a little interesting thing you can do if you think your player has underperformed. You can move that captaincy onto another player to have another chance at double points. Same goes for substitutions. Now, we've all been there in fantasy football where your bench performs a hell of a lot better than your actual team. It's happened to me on more than one occasion already this season. But again, like with the captaincy, you can actually make substitutions in the World Cup game mode, meaning that, again, if someone underperforms and you think one of your players on your bench is going to do better than one of the players that you've already had play, you can substitute that player out for someone on the bench, giving you another chance at getting points from there. Next up is the boosters, which we know as chips from normal fantasy football. The wildcard rule is the same as always, but there are 2 different ones that we have as opposed to bench boost and free hit that we know from normal fantasy football. The 12th man allows you to select a random player, well, not a random player, you get to pick the player, but any player from any budget just to be a 12th man in your squad for the game week. And essentially that player will just score you additional points on top of your normal team. You cannot captain them. They are just quite literally a 12th player. So say you don't have enough money left over to get Kylian Mbappe and you really fancy him in a game that France are playing this week, then all you do is you just select Mbappe as your 12th man and he will get you 12th man points for that week. Secondly, there is the power captain, which I think is a fantastic option, where we've all had those game weeks where you don't really know who to put as captain because you think so many of your players are going to do well, but you just don't really know which one you're going to go for, and you just know the one that you do pick is the one that's going to flop. Well, the World Cup Fantasy Football allows you this power captain option, which will automatically set your highest scoring player as your captain for that week. Really nice addition that they have added for this one. And finally, we then have the scoring system, which again is very different and will definitely affect the players that I'm going to pick for my team. Starting off, it is only 1 point for the appearance, and that is when you hit 60 minutes. Normally, it's 1 point for playing, 2 points for reaching 60 minutes. In World Cup, it is 1 point just for playing 60 minutes. And that doesn't mean that if someone comes on in the second half, they don't get any other points. It just means they won't get any appearance points. All players get +3 on assists like they normally do. -1 for the yellow, -2 for the red as always, -2 for the own goal. But in addition, we have +2 for winning a penalty and -1 for conceding a penalty. So slightly interesting, adding those extra things to it makes it more risque, makes you potentially go for some more dribblers over your usual goal scorers if you think players are good at winning penalties. On to the goalkeepers, and this is where it starts to get really interesting. Clean sheets for goalkeepers are now worth 5 as opposed to 4, but that makes sense because you're only getting 1 point for the appearance. Goalkeeper's clean sheet must be at 70 minutes as opposed to the usual 60, and this is where it gets really interesting. Normal fantasy football, we know it is -1 point for every 2 goals conceded. In the World Cup game mode, it is -1 after the second goal. So no points for conceding the first goal, then 1 point for 2, 2 points for 3, 3 points for 4, so on and so on and so on. So really have to be careful about your goalkeeping options, and that same applies for defenders as well. Clean sheet +5, first goal conceded 0, each additional goal -1. So you have to be very, very careful about who you're picking in your defence because you don't want to risk them being in teams that could quite easily get thrashed. In terms of goals scored, it's now +9 for a goalkeeper if they score, which I think is fair enough. I'm surprised it's not that in usual fantasy football. +3 for the penalty save, as always, and +1 for every 3 saves, as always. For defenders, it is +7 for a goal scored, as opposed to the usual +6. I'm going to skip over midfielders for now because they have a lot of extra things, midfielders, that will definitely affect how I pick my midfield. For attackers, it is +5 for a goal, as opposed to the usual +4. Again, counteracting the fact that there's only 1 for the appearance. But we have an extra point for every 2 shots on target, which I think is a very interesting addition. It makes me think you could go for more players like Cristiano Ronaldo, who, even though they haven't been scoring regularly, are having regular shots on target. This is something that only applies to forwards, so you do not get a +1 for midfielders every time they have 2 shots on goal. This only applies to attackers. As for those midfielders, the reason why I've left it is because of these things right here. For every 3 tackles made by a midfielder, you get an extra +1, and for every 2 key passes, you get a +1. So plenty of point scoring opportunities for particular midfielders. I'm thinking the likes of Rodri. I'm thinking the likes of Rodrigo de Paul. Those players that sit in the midfield are a little bit more aggressive, but also a little bit more creative. There is many opportunities for them players to score points during the World Cup on top of your usual goal scoring and goal assisting midfielders. And most crucially, goals scored for midfielders is also +5. So there is no benefit of going for goal-scoring midfielders over goal-scoring forwards, as the forwards are getting the same points as midfielders for goals scored. And that is it in terms of the rules. If you have any other questions, the website is obviously there, and feel free to comment down below if there is anything you want clarifying. Let's now move ahead to the team. So on to the main team itself, and this team is purely organised by time. It is not organised by who I think is going to get the most points. Like you said, you can change these things dynamically as the match days go on. So you can substitute players out, you can switch your captain. So my team is built in terms of who is playing first, because if someone underperforms, I will then bring in someone from the bench. And we'll start with the 2 goalkeepers, which are Jordan Pickford and Hugo Lloris. Now, I would have gone for Emi Martinez, but sadly, the World Cup mode has not been fully updated yet, so players are not all on there yet. Hopefully, by the time you come around to making your team, and by the time you're watching this video, it would have been updated because there are a fair few players missing. So for now, it's Pickford and Lloris, but fully expect me to have Emi Martinez in the team for Argentina when he is added. On to the back line, and we're going to stick with England again, and that is going to be Luke Shaw. Don't really need to say much about him. He's England's only left back in this tournament, so he is going to be playing every game, I think. And they have a good start against Iran. Next to him is Denzel Dumfries. Now, I am aware that Holland do have a very good backup right back in
Jeremy Frimpong.
But Dumfries has been playing the majority of the games thus far, and he is the most expensive fullback on the game, but he always seems to perform. Next to him, I have gone for Marcus Acuna. This is probably where my team would flip if it went the other way. Acuna is the starting left back for Argentina. Lloris is the starting goalkeeper for France. What I would like is Martinez in goal for Argentina and Theo Hernandez in defence for France. But sadly, neither are on the game yet. So for now, it is Lloris and Acuna. Although, to be fair, at 4.5 million, Marcus Acuna is a very good pickup nonetheless. On to my incredibly risky pick, because I'm going for Alphonso Davies. Now, the reason I've done this is because Canada have listed Alphonso Davies as a forward. He is quite literally going to be playing either striker or, at the worst, left wing. Now, this is where you have to pay attention to the fact that you can get 7 points for a defender scoring. That is why I've gone for Alphonso Davies. It is a massive risk given the fact that every time he concedes, he's going to start losing points the other way. But I think it is a gamble worth taking, especially considering the fact that you can make substitutions. And my final defender is going to be the Brazil left back, which is Alex Telles. Again, 4.5 million. He started the last few games at left back for Brazil. I think a very good option there. into the midfield, and a player that I spoke about when we mentioned the rule changes, and that is going to be Rodrigo Javier de Paul. Essentially the hub of the Argentinian midfield. He plays so many passes. He's so influential in breaking up the play as well. I think he is going to be very good at getting those 3 tackles and 2 key passes points. On top of that, he's always good for an assist as well. So at 5 million, Rodrigo de Paul is, in my opinion, an absolute must for the first few fixtures. Next to him, we've gone for Joshua Kimmich. Very similar, and we all know about his exploits from how well he does in Champions League. Again, good at winning the ball back, great at making key passes. So for me, Kimmich is another one that is a good option to have. Next to him, we've gone for Daichi Kamada. Very, very cheap option for Japan. He does have a very tough group, but he's scoring so many goals for Frankfurt in the Bundesliga. He is essentially Japan's main player in this tournament, and I think he's a very cheap pickup. And of course, as always, if it doesn't work out for him, we can always substitute him out because we have 2 very good substitute options on the bench. Those are Bernardo Silva, who I actually think could be player of the tournament. Again, I spoke about it when we did the predictions. I think Portugal are going to win the World Cup, and I think this guy is going to be the guy at the World Cup. I've just got a feeling he's been so good for Man City over the last few years. He doesn't get talked about anywhere near enough because of the exploits of De Bruyne and obviously Erling Haaland this season. But this is a massive, massive player. He's one of the best players in the world, and I really think this is going to be his tournament. And next to him, we have gone for the West Ham player, Lucas Paqueta. Not really set the world alight in the Premier League, but he is a massive player for Brazil. He starts every single game. He is going to be the player behind Neymar in that attacking line, and I think he's very good for goals and assists in this tournament. And that, of course, leaves our 3 strikers. We're going to start with the England captain and my captain for the opening game, which is, of course, Harry Kane. Goals! We all know my history of captaining Harry Kane. It never goes well, but thankfully I can transfer the captaincy if it doesn't work this time. But I think he's got an outside chance. If not, I'd say outside chance. I think he's got a very good chance of going back-to-back Golden Boot winners, Harry Kane. We've got a pretty simple group and a nice run towards the semi-finals if we get through. So for me, Harry Kane is a must in fantasy football teams this year. Next to him, we have gone for the highest goal-contributing player in the world this season, and that is Cody Gakpo. 9 goals, 12 assists in just 13 games for him this season. An even better goal contribution rate than Erling Haaland. I'm very interested to see how he does at this World Cup. So I wanted to put him in. I wanted to see what he's got. So yeah, Cody Gakpo gets in the team. And finally, I think we all know who's coming. The most expensive player on the fantasy football. It is, of course, Kylian Mbappe. Playing in the position he wants to play in, off the striker. More than likely going to be Giroud. I was very, very tempted to put Giroud in anyway, but I have gone for Kylian Mbappe. And that is going to be it. I have created my own fantasy football league. A link to that will be available in the description and in the top comment. As always, let me know who you're going to be going for. Thank you very much for watching as always, and I will see you tomorrow where we will be starting our daily World Cup prediction series. Thank you very much for watching.